Welcome to part 3 of our series on how to create your podcast. I'm just sharing the steps that I've gone through to create my podcast, and I'm hoping it helps you create yours. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to set up your guests, have them ready to go for the best experience, and to be consistent every time you go to do your podcast. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to the channel. If you haven't watched episode 1 and 2 of how to get your podcast started right away using some of the methods that I use to get my podcast started, then go ahead and go watch those two and then come back to this episode. In this episode, we're going to set everything up so everything's really consistent. And I like to think big, and I want you to think big too. I want to think that someday, once things get rolling and the podcast grows, I may be hiring VAs or other people to help with each part of the podcast, including inviting guests, potentially editing. And I want everything to be consistent. In order to gain that consistency and be able to scale, you have to set up a system. So I'm going to share those systems with you. I've taken bits and pieces from other people, plus bits and pieces from my experience. And let's get started. First of all, you want a list of the steps to produce each podcast episode. I use Hive to keep all that straight, and I'm going to show you my template in just 1 second. But you could use a spreadsheet. You could use just a list that you make, and you're welcome to use my list of steps, or you could use an AI tool to kind of get you started so you're not looking at a blank page to get started with this. But I'll show you my template. I created my template in Hive. I highly recommend Hive to set up project templates so that all of your projects are consistent. So this is my Hive template for my Journey to Impact podcast so that each and every one of these steps happens every single time I record an episode. And later on, I can assign these steps to other people. So first of all, I have a form I send out to my guests, inviting them to the podcast and giving them some questions to kind of set things up for the podcast. I'll show you that form next. Then we want to schedule a recording. In that step, I schedule the recording on my preferred recording platform, which is StreamYard. We will get into StreamYard in our next episode. I send a guest link to join them to that podcast stream. And that way I don't forget to do that, and I know it's ready to go for them. In the next step, I want to create questions for each guest. They often want them ahead of time so that they're ready when the time comes, but I don't really skip very closely to my script that I give them, and they don't either. But sometimes they want to add a question that will lead us to discussing something new that they want to promote. Perhaps it is a new product or service or their website or a project or something like that, which I'm happy to do and lead them down that path. It just helps us both get on the same page. So that's the create questions step. Now, I have a template in Google Drive, which I'll show you in one moment, that I use to start with, and then I edit it for each particular guest. And I have specific instructions here to copy and share with the guests. Now, I know that. I know that that's what has to happen. But if I were to give this step to someone else, they'll now know and be able to do this step. I do have the questions listed here as well, but the main question template I go off of is this template in Google Drive. Next step is the schedule the release date step. And in this step, I notify guests of the release date of their podcast because their episode could have been recorded well in advance of the release date. I also can send them media release information and a thank you, of course, for being on the podcast and a link to the episode. And I encourage them to send it out to their followers so that we can get more people tuning in to the podcast episode on YouTube or any of the podcast apps. I'm going to edit the episode. I use Camtasia. I have a teaser segment that I pull out and put ahead of the intro. and then I download the episode as well as the audio version of the episode. In addition, we have to create a thumbnail, and I went through my process to do that in our last episode. But again, if I assign this out, someone will need to do that. Then I go to create shorts from the episode, at least 2, if not more, and I use Opus Clip to do that. Link in the description. And I write a description for the episode to go on YouTube and on the audio podcast channels, a social media post and thumbnail to go across all my social media channels, and then I post the episode and advertise it. Each of those steps I want to do each and every single time I do a podcast episode, and you'd think I would remember them all, but often I go back and I go, oh, I forgot to make shorts. Oh, I forgot to do this. So it's really important to have this consistent process recorded. Again, I use Hive, and I use this view of Hive to do this, which I love because then I can just drag and drop each step in progress or completed, so that I know where I'm at in working on my podcast episode if I had to step away, as well as if I have other people working on this episode, they can do that as well. There is a link to Hive in the description below if you need a project management tool that is simple but has a lot of features, including Hive Assist, which is an AI tool to help you come up with project lists, project formats. They have lots of templates. I keep all of the projects and all of my clients in Hive, and I highly recommend it. All right, so what's next? What do we need to do next? So we've got our template, and there are pieces of that I said I would show you. So let's move in and do that. All right, let's look at the guest form I send each and every guest when they have said yes to doing my podcast episode. So this is the guest form. I ask for their name, their company organization, a short bio that I can put into the description, any social media handles and website addresses they want me to share. Are we connected on LinkedIn? Because if we're not, we need to be. A promotional link for a particular product or service that they want to mention in the episode. I want them to give me that. If they have a suggestion for their episode title, I ask them for that. Often they do not. If they have a particular date they are targeting. So again, if they are releasing something new in their business, I want to help them by coinciding the episode with that release if I can. Is there anything they want to emphasize during the episode, or is there a question that they want me to ask them? And then I put a headshot of everyone on the thumbnails that I produce. Again, I went through that in the last episode, but I use Canva for that. I ask them for that headshot, and oftentimes they either forget to do that or they don't have one they really like. We all know how we are about headshots. So then I go out on the internet and I find one, or I can ask them later. And then they submit that. That launches the project that I just showed you in Hive with that template. So then that episode is set up and ready to go. So far, the process is ask your guests in person, either on a Zoom call, a call, or in person when you see them live. Ask them, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Explain the thread and the point of your podcast. I have not had a no yet, which I'm very excited about. I may have just jinxed myself, but that's okay. Ask them. People will help you out with that. And then I launch this form because then I know they're getting the information and that they're going to commit. If they don't fill out the form, I double check that they really want to do it. But give them the form. They fill that out. When it returns to me in Hive, it launches that template. I now have the project set up and I can schedule them to record. All right, so that is this step. Now let's look at that question template that I talked about earlier. All right, here is my Journey to Impact question template that I use. And there are way more questions here than I could ever ask in an episode, but I want there to be plenty of information. Occasionally, you'll get a guest that is very concise with their answers. And if that is the case, you may have to ask more questions, but it helps them kind of fill their brain with the type of information you're going to ask them about, which is really helpful for them and helpful for you. I make a copy of this template and each person has their own because I usually go in and edit these questions depending upon the guest and what I know about them. I will say it's super fun because I think I know them and I think I know the answers I'm going to get, and they usually fool me, teach me something completely new about themselves, or add some information I never knew. And that's super fun during the episode to do. But you want a place to start. So here's my question template. If you want a copy of my question template, I'm happy to send it to you. Get in touch with me through our website or put a comment below and I'll share it with you. But you need to write questions that help people frame answers around the thread that you have chosen for your podcast. So my questions are about impact, how people got to where they are in their careers and creating that impact. What were the motivations behind that? Any advice they'd give new entrepreneurs or people that are seeking to provide impact in their community. Any upcoming projects they may want to talk about. Anything like that. So this is just a starter for me and the guest. I edit from here. They can edit from here. And we go with that. I can put it on my phone and use it to ask questions as the podcast moves forward. Lately, I get one or two questions in, and then the discussion just organically develops. But they feel better if you send them some questions. All right, let's go through all the steps one more time. And you're welcome to use these steps or any of the templates I've mentioned. Just let me know. I'm happy to share with you. First, personally invite a guest to your podcast. Tell them what it's about. You can write out a little pitch and rehearse that. Start with friends and family first, not complete strangers, because then they may lead you to other guests you can have on your podcast. And you'll be surprised at the number of people you can think of within your circle you can invite to your podcast. Personally invite them. When they say yes, I go into HighLevel workflow and I actually put a tag on their contact information, which sends them off the initial email saying, thanks for being a guest, and sends them the Hive survey. All right. So personally ask, then I tag them, or you can send off an email to invite them to your podcast with the survey link. When they complete the survey and it comes back, it triggers the project in Hive so that now I have all the steps I have to do to complete their podcast episode from start to finish. I can do them all myself consistently, which is what I'm doing now. But as I grow, I hope I can assign those steps to other people that they can work on. All right. Then I start through the steps, which is really step by step in my process and keeps me on track. I set up a StreamYard link. I copy my templated questions. I edit my questions. Then I set off the templated email with the questions and the link to how they can join the podcast when the time comes. Again, I do a video podcast and an audio piece, and I do it all virtually, although I have done some on location ones recently. Check those out in the podcast section of YouTube or in your favorite podcast area. I shoot the podcast with that guest, and then it's time to edit, which I'm going to show you in our next piece in this series of how to start your podcast, a way to really cut down the editing. If you're not a video editor, if you use StreamYard, you could literally just post it. I do a little editing, and I'll show you what I mean by that in our next episode. Edit your podcast, create some shorts, create thumbnails for the podcast and descriptions. Put it all out there on the day with your thumbnails, your descriptions, and your links. Put out some social media. Tell your guests to put out some social media and post it in all your favorite podcast areas. We'll cover that next time. But you can do this step by step. It really helps to have the steps listed again in a spreadsheet, in a Google Doc, or use a project management system such as Hive, so you're very consistent and you don't have to remember all the steps. They're all there for you. And hopefully you'll grow this podcast so you can assign them out to others as it grows. Well, thank you again for watching this video to the end. Any of these resources I'm happy to provide. We have links in the description below to the equipment I use, as well as to Hive. If you want to give that a trial, that would be awesome. I think you would really like it. It'll help you be more efficient in your business. Please subscribe. It really helps me be able to make more content for you. And let's get this podcast going. Set these steps up. In a couple of weeks, we'll have our final episode, and I'll show you how to use StreamYard to create your video or audio podcast. Until then, remember, without impact, it doesn't matter. Take care.